Parrying and dodge are two of the most crucial skills to master in the latter difficulties of Space Marine 2. With the different weapon flavors of defense and the varying parry animations from class to class, this skill is honestly one of the hardest ones to master in the game, especially if you like to play Bulwark. In this video today, I want to break down how to master parry, but to do so, you also need to understand a lot about the animation breakdown and timing. We'll show some examples of how fencing, balance, and block work alongside parry, so you can decide which weapons to bring with you to war. Now, I've gone over all this information in a few of my videos already, but I wanted to break it down on its own video in case people just need help on this subject. And this is your first time on my channel, the way I do things is by upfronting the knowledge in my videos. So with that being said, let's start out with talking about the defense stat on weapons. Fencing has a drastically increased perfect parry window over balance, to the point that if you're struggling to get parries off, this will make it almost an auto perfect parry every time. Balance is of course a much smaller window. If I were to break the spread down in percentages, I'd say it's a 50-50 on perfect parry versus parry for balance. Whereas fencing, it feels more like 80-20 for perfect versus normal parry. It's just that much of an increase. Now, a parry will deflect an attack, stopping the damage and pushing things back slightly with a small stagger. A perfect parry will do the same, but also give you a follow-up gun strike for possible armor depending on talents, increased damage, and other goodies. The block stat sits outside of the previous two in that it will simply negate the damage if you time what would be a parry properly. There's no stagger, gun strike, nothing. It just completely removes the damage. As far as mastering parry, it really is just going to come down to reps in the game. Outside of that, I want you to think of parrying as part of a flow or animation. If you parry like you're playing Dark Souls, which I've been doing, you'll oftentimes miss. Since there's a small windup, you have to parry slightly before you think you should. Lastly, Bulwark timing with parry, if you're playing on a mouse and keyboard, is very tricky because the game wants to prioritize blocking over parry, since those are all bound to the same key. You're missing parries more because of the game and less because of you. Unless you're using a fencing weapon, then it seems to work better. My suggestion is try a controller. If you're very quick with the tap on a controller, you get far more parries. It's what I use actually. But that's the too long didn't watch this entire video, and even that was just quite long. So if that's all you wanted to know, please feel free to shut the video down and get back to parrying the Emperor's enemies. You can also jump ahead to any part of the video using the chapters in the timeline. If this video ends up helping you, please don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe, as each one of those things helps me in a massive way. If you've not picked up Space Marine 2, you can use my Fanatical link, which has a 12% discount, and I make an 8% commission. But please always choose what's best for you and your wallet. And don't forget to check out my Twitch linked below, where I'm streaming multiplayer and operations all the time. But let's get started here on mastering parry and weapon defense stats in Space Marine 2. So before we get started here, I do want to do a quick shout out to Tony Coast, who did an amazing parry video. It's 24 minutes long and he breaks down every little bit of the animation. So please go and check out this video that he did. It's just really well done. He brings up a lot of things that I've talked about in streams and stuff like that, where Bulwark has a weird issue with the parry versus block mechanic, and he expertly describes everything. So I wanted to give a shout out here. You can go and check his video out. I've linked it in the description and in the pinned comment. So again, please go and check out Tony. And to start our conversation off, we're going to go through our different defense and weapon types before we jump into some trials mode to show off how these really kind of come together. And our defense types are over here. We've got fencing, block, and balanced. We talked about this in the intro of this video, but we're going to go through it here for the sake of continuity. So fencing is, of course, an increased perfect parry window. Balanced is a moderate perfect parry window, and block is a no perfect parry window. Block, though it says no perfect parry window, it can still parry, right? It just simply blocks the damage. Parry will have a small animation that kind of sends things back, whereas perfect parry sends things back, it staggers them, and it gives you that gun strike. So there's a lot more value in a perfect parry. And as I've said before too, the spread I want you to think of here is an 80-20 for fencing. You're 80% likely to get a perfect parry off. Balance is a solid 50-50, with it being 0-100, right? For block, you're just always going to negate the damage without any of the big perks. And I'm going to use the Thunder Fist for all these, the Power Fist for all these examples. It's my favorite weapon to use on the Bulwark. You can say whatever you want about wanting to use one or the other. Please, by all means, just go ahead and use them. They're all going to be fun and great and dandy for you, but it's also important just to know what those animations are going to be like. Chainsword is a really good example here because you're going to use a chainsword on a tactical. You can use it on a Vanguard. You're going to be using it possibly on Assault, possibly on a Bulwark. It's one of the weapons that can be used in almost every single class, except for, of course, the heavy and the sniper. But it has an interesting parry animation versus the Power Fist, versus the Power Sword, versus the Combat Knife. Every single one of them has that difference. And it's also worth noting how that defense stat links back to you. Of course, yeah, you've got the fact that fencing has an increased perfect parry window, but with that, you have some form of trade-off. So let's take a look at, you know what? Let's go over here to Assault, and let's take a look at the Thunderhammer, because the Thunderhammer has a really obvious distinction between the three. So I've got this one right here. I don't have the money for that. I got this one right here. This is a block one. So with a block Thunderhammer, we have a decent speed for Thunderhammer at 4.5. We have a 6 cleaving potential, and we have a whopping 12 strength. So the trade-off here to going to fencing, to go from basically what is a pure offensive weapon to a quote-unquote pure defensive weapon, you can see that there is a direct trade-off. When I go to a block weapon, I get more cleaving potential, I'm faster, and I do have more strength on the weapon. Whereas the balance kind of sits somewhere in between that, with one thing or multiple things getting a little bit of a bonus here. So cleaving potential is increased by 2 between my fencing and balanced weapon. So you as the player have to decide, do you want to focus on aggression? Do you want to focus on defense? Do you want to have a balance of the two? I won't lie to you, fencing is almost always like an auto take until you really get the timing down. I will never go with block. The defense of a block, or I'm sorry, the offense bonus of a block weapon is purely negligible in almost all cases to me. A 1.5 on strength is nowhere near as valuable, especially if I'm playing ruthless operations. It's nowhere near as valuable as being able to reliably get perfect parries off that enable gun strikes that will give me, in the case of my Assault, that will give me armor back, because non-lethal gun strikes for Assault can give armor back if you have the talent. And oftentimes too, if you do it against any of the Gaunts or Zangors, it's going to give you a gun strike that kills them, that gives you armor back. There's just too much value in a perfect parry to sit on the sidelines for a block for a 1.5 more damage. Even if I'm taking a look at the Power Fist, or as I would call it incorrectly, the Thunder Fist, played this game for 20 fucking years, you think I'd get the names right. I use the fencing one, because taking a look at the block one, I actually lose damage. I get cleave potential, but screw that. I don't need cleave potential because I'm already using a Power Fist, which has great AoE innately built into it. So there are some balance issues right now with how defense as a stat works for the actual stats of the weapon we're talking about, right? Like the trade-off isn't always really there. There's never a time where I'm going to want to go, yeah, give me the block. Give me the block here. I want that cleavage potential. No, give me the 10.5 damage and near perfect parry all the time with fencing. The balance here too, I'm dropping 2 speed and I'm gaining 2 cleave potential, but I'm losing that perfect parry window. So I wanted to go through this because it's an important portion of understanding parry. And it's an important thing to note too, that you're going to start with a balance. And that's okay. You're going to eventually move into a balance or a block if you're going with the Power Fist. Then finally you get a fencing one and Artificer. Or if you're going with the Chainsword, you get a fencing one right here, right? Yeah, right there. Yeah, Artificer as well. You get a fencing weapon very early with the Power Sword, which is a godsend if you're using the Power Sword. It is honestly like night and day once you go from the Power Sword with balance to fencing, because remember, the only person who can use a Power Sword is the Bulwark, and you've probably been struggling with parry on your Bulwark. So now let's jump into some examples of block versus balance versus fencing in the trials. I lied. We're not going to show off the individual stats for defense and how that actually computes. We're going to show how to parry, because that's an important part of this video. And what I'm using here is just a very level 1 chainsword. It's unbalanced. It's not a fencing weapon. It's not a block weapon. And what I'm going to try to show here, this is live, so it's going to be a little tricky, is the difference between a parry and a perfect parry. And really you have to know here is that the parry, to get it into especially the perfect window, you have to wind it up slightly before. If you're thinking of like a Soulsborne game like a Sekiro or a Bloodborne or Dark Souls, we parry in those games right before it hits. In this game, you have to lead the parry a little bit because your character has a small wind-up or animation where the character will bring this chainsword across their left shoulder and swipe it out. I'm using the chainsword in this example because that covers 4 classes. We'll do power sword stuff on its own. So we'll show what this looks like. Basically, what we're looking for is a parry. I will simply hit the parry button. It'll slightly slow the creature down, but there will be no gun strike and it negates the damage. A perfect parry will slow down time more. The camera will adjust even greater. The creature will get parried. They'll step back further, be staggered, and a gun strike will appear. Let's try and set this up here. The timing is funky because I've just been doing it so much. So that was a perfect parry. It really locked us in, and it did a good, cool animation with it. That's a perfect parry. Try and get that. That's a perfect parry. I'm trying to like lag it. That's just a normal parry. See how it didn't launch them back? They just kind of stayed in the mix still. That's a perfect parry. And you can see still, like, what you want to do here is you want that, and you see it. That's a normal parry. You see them coming in, and you want to kind of wind that animation up. That's an example of doing it too late, right? Like, there's a parry. That's a perfect parry. Basically, if they move back, that is a perfect parry. That's a parry. And I knew that one was going to be one because I did it a little late. I felt it a little bit later. And you'll get the timing down, right? Like, that's a parry. That's a perfect parry, actually. That's a perfect parry. And I'm trying to show you these visual examples between the two so you can see how it changes the flow of combat, right? Like, if you parry that attack, he's still going to come back in for that next one right after. Versus a parry, a perfect parry, we'll see how he's going to keep doing his attack combos. A perfect parry resets them. That's the most important thing to know between the two because it really sets the mode or tempo for how you're going to approach all this, because it is just going to be a drastic change in how the flow of combat is going to really make itself be known. If you deal with this and you learn the difference between these two, you'll know then how to respond. If you got that parry off, you know another attack's coming, you need to be able to get another parry going. If you perfect parry, you broke up the cadence of their combo, you can get a gun strike, you can get some distance, whatever you need to do. But hopefully you see now it's really a matter of getting this wind up down. If you understand that, like seeing how that kind of bring it across and everything, if you lead the attack a little bit more, the character will drop his arm, bring his chainsword across, and then you're good. If you wait just a little too long, if you time it with when you think that hit is going to hit you, you'll just get a parry. You basically want to see the telegraph of their attack animation, parry, boom, you're good. Now, let's switch over to the Bulwark and show how to do some parry. So I'm on a Bulwark using a balanced chainsword, just a level 1 chainsword, and it is tricky to parry as the Bulwark because of the animation for blocking and the animation for parry are literally like a quarter of a second, a single millisecond of holding the button. If you're on a mouse and keyboard, bind the parry button to a new button that is easier for you to gingerly tap. You need to quickly press it. You cannot hold it for any length of time at all. If you're on a controller, same situation. Keep it on the whatever button it is, but you just have to tap it. If you don't tap it, the character will go into a block. They'll bring their shield up and completely negate the damage, or it'll hit them with a heavy hit and they'll burst, a big blue burst, and they'll lose control. It's the trickiest thing to learn. Being on a balance weapon, it is really hard to strike that, well, quote unquote balance. But with a fencing weapon, it is very easy. And I'm going to mess this up because I have to keep this thing alive. It takes a long time to actually set this up. So let's press continue and we'll jump back into this. And you're going to see the difference here between this and the tactical, which I find to be far easier to set up these parries, or even on a Vanguard, which they have an increased perfect parry window. So let's go ahead and continue. See, there's our parry. That's a block. And I wanted to actually parry that. And I mean, you cannot hold it down for any length of time, or else that happens. You get a block in, and it's the big splash, block. It's fine with these little minor hits, right? Block, block, but you really just gotta take the hit in the face like I just did. There's your perfect parry. You just have to be very quick, very ginger. My arm comes back, and we're good to go. Right when their arm comes up, my arm comes back. And you try to parry a dodge. And there you go, I went a little too late, and I tried to parry a dodge again. You just want to get that timing down, and you just want to be so ginger with it. I feel like I'm like Gordon Ramsay talking about, like, there you go. Put on and plate. A nice saffron rice with a side of turkey leg. Just be very quick and ginger. It's really tricky, and you're probably like, oh man, I can't even get the balancing down, or the parry down on a balance. It will click. And once it does, you feel like every single weapon you're using is a fencing weapon. Because the timing for me, I've been on Ruthless missions now for a week, because I've had the game extra time, because I had review codes, so I've had the benefit of having tons of reps in the game. But don't get discouraged, it just takes time. When I was playing with Indie Pride, we were like, is there something wrong? Like, why can't we get perfect parries? Because for the Bulwark, there is a perfect parry perk at level 3 or 4 that drops a shock aura behind underneath them. It was so tedious that I emailed back to Focus Entertainment and said, hey, is there a bug with the perfect parry for for the Bulwark? And the response back was very political and very nice, but it was basically skill issue, bro. Once you understand that perfect parry window and how you have to be very quick about it, you'll really line them up far easier. And it's just a matter of being ginger about it. Even though, you see those moments though where like I mess up and it actually doesn't parry. It just kind of like, and it doesn't even like normally block it. You have the benefit of, since it shields there, it's like an insulated parry or some sort. Where like, okay, you missed your parry window, you missed your perfect parry window. We're gonna give you like this like semi-block parry thing, where the character just kind of blocks the damage, but the thing still does what it wants to do. Because it's the difference is just between a block and a parry is just that little tiny tap. So hopefully that helps you out on understanding Bulwark a bit better. It's really about getting that, as soon as you see that elbow, right? Elbow. Elbow. My elbow, not their creatures. Elbow. Elbow. It's like when you're learning to high five properly, right? You look at someone's elbow. Just as soon as that elbow comes up at the right moment, you're going to get that parry off. Now to show off the different types. And we're going to start with a block weapon. I'm going to use Power Sword on Bulwark so you can see this on everyone. And this is how a block weapon will work. I'm going to just keep the Horde here. I was going to narrow it down to just the Warrior, but I want you to see how this actually would work in the game versus just a controlled environment. So I will do parries, and when I do parries with a block weapon, you'll notice that nothing will happen, pretty much. I'm just going to simply negate the damage. So we'll get this going here. Of course, we're going to shop into like the worst shooter in the game, and I'm going to get stabbed to begin with. It's going to be real good pacing for this whole video, I think. Let me actually kill this thing. It'll spawn a warrior if I do. There we go. And by warrior, I mean Ravener. So that is block, right? We're just simply blocking against it. That's all that's happening. We're just going to tap it in time, and it's just going to create a real crappy block animation that really sucks. You don't get really any benefit to doing it. It's just going to stop the damage. It doesn't stagger. It doesn't set things back. It doesn't give me really any advantage at all. It doesn't create any openings. Everything else, though, is the same. The timing's the same, everything. It just doesn't give me the huge benefit of parrying something proper where I would actually, see, just kind of, it's really no different than just holding down this. In fact, this is better because I can maneuver around. I can actually do stuff if you're playing with the Bulwark. Other classes obviously don't have this benefit, but it's just important to kind of see this because block just is never really worth it in my opinion. It's never really going to give me that huge of an advantage. I'm just simply going to be out all of the benefits of parrying. And it even has like really crappy follow-up animation. So you really can't get out of a sticky situation with a block weapon like you can with even just a balance. You can see in those motions where I do block it, yeah, I put like, it looks like I put the shield and the sword down to like block my crotch or whatever, and it doesn't actually give me any kind of momentary iframes, any kind of fluidity to maintain another parry or another dodge or anything. So you can see here that doing a block, or using a block weapon, I'm sorry, is really actually very punishing. And the trade-off is very minimal in my personal opinion. Now our next one here is for balance. This is of course going to be that 50-50 between a perfect parry and a parry. So we can see how that's going to flow in an actual environment where we're going to be shooting things. I hate these damn shooters with like their shotguns. They just rip you up. And whenever we get an actual good attack here, we'll be able to show that off. Assuming that this sniper doesn't just end in beforehand. There we go. Oh, good. Come on, Uncle Rabbie. There we go. We get a perfect parry right out the gate. And perfect parries, you know, something I forgot to mention here is perfect parries kill any Gaunt or Zangor that decides to go throw fisticuffs with you. And you can see with the balance, we're not getting as many perfect parries. It's more a skill issue than anything, right? But the window for it is not as forgiving as it's going to be with the fencing, which we'll see in a second. Oh man, I forgot to jump. I thought it was a slither. But we create those little iframes, we create those moments where, and that's another thing to mention too, without a perfect parry like that, let's see how we just get all these nice swipes across. It helps us spin the herd with doing a perfect parry, which we don't get with a block weapon at all. So balance enables you just a far better like wave clear in addition to being able to do more. Oh, okay, I guess I did that. And again, just to reiterate, that balance is going to give us those capabilities to actually give us room once we do those parries. It gives us the capability to actually enable perfect parries onto those Gaunts, which can kill them outright. Zangors can kill them outright. It's a very important mechanic that I think just is not worth it to stick with any block weapon. Now, let's jump over to a fencing weapon. Now, of course, with a fencing weapon, we're going to have a vastly increased perfect parry window. So Gaunts that jump at us and we get the perfect parry off, we should be able to kill more of them, and we should be able to stagger those Majoris enemies that jump into us and give us a little bit more breathing room in those sticky stitches. What I was going to do is a little, these, I can't stress how much I hate those things. If you're wondering what my skin is, I am using a Black Templar Sword Brethren, which is those badass veterans of the Black Templar. My favorite units, next to the Singular Guard. There we go, already opening up with a perfect parry, into a bad parry, into a terrible not parry. That's all skill issue right there. That has nothing to do with the weapon. Now, those moments like that too, like I said, is like you get those moments where your character, rather than actually parrying, if you mess up on a bulwark, you get like an added benefit of, oh, okay, I pressed the button, but no, screw me, right? Screw your little video you're making, guy. And it's just a great way to kind of clear stuff. You don't actually have to actively attack. You can just perfect parry your way through all these little Gaunts. Oh, man, you miss it. Come on, Rabbie. Man, there's an achievement, by the way, if you do all three of those in once. Or every one of his combos. So, that's our perfect parry, right? It's so much more accessible on a fencing weapon. You can see how it's way easier just to kind of like tap. You can even be a little late. You can get a little messy with it. So, what are the big takeaways of this video? It's going to come down to you as the player. Do you want the trade-off of block? I don't ever recommend it, but it's there. You can go ahead and use it. Who fucking gives a shit what the internet says? If you want to use a block weapon and that's all you want to have fun with, then by all means do it. The very first block Thunderhammer that you unlock for Assault is a lot of fun because it's like a ton of damage. I think it's like 11 or 10.5. That's awesome to unlock at Master Crafted level, which is very early in the operations grind. But is it worth sacrificing all the gain from just a parry, all the extreme gain from a perfect parry? There's a lot to be said here about what you get and what you lose. Now, when we take a look at a perfect parry and a parry, remember what we get, right? With a parry, we get the ability to shut down the damage coming our way with a slight little stagger depending, or blowback depending on what kind of creature it is. Now with a perfect parry, we get the interruption of a combo on a Majoris, the gun strike, which can afford us that armor, and we get the capability to outright kill any kind of Minoris style of enemy. There's so much benefit there. And what I will say is, once you get the parry down on a fencing weapon, you'll find that it is far easier to parry on a balance weapon. So if you can, jump to a fencing weapon as fast as possible, and then get that pacing, get that timing down, learn that elbow on the Bulwark, find out how you're gonna maneuver around to get that parry activated, because once you do on a fencing reliably, it's very easy to go to a balance weapon. I've used balanced almost my entire time on Bulwark because I was using a power fist. That's just what I wanted to use. I switched over to the fencing one because it's actually kind of like the best one in Relic tier in my opinion. And I found it, a ton easier, and I was getting way more perfect parries and tons of shock grenades down and all sorts of awesome action. But I had already cemented real good muscle memory coming up to the fencing. So just know that I think if you start with fencing, you might actually kind of build some terrible habits as far as that timing goes. But I think at the same time, if you're struggling completely with parry, fencing at least opens the door with training wheels on so that you can learn that timing properly. So hopefully this video gives you a better idea on how to approach parry. It is a real tricky mechanic. And like I said, I just couldn't get it right for the first 10 hours, 15 hours of the game. It really took me, even playing other classes than the Bulwark, and I'm using Bulwark as an example because I think it's the one people struggle with the most to parry, but playing other classes other than Bulwark to help me get the timing down, to then come back to it. Vanguard is a really good way to learn parry because they have talents that help the parry window, and parrying with a combat knife is super fast. So try that out for a little bit. Play a level or two of the Vanguard, then jump back to Bulwark if you're struggling. Or play on Tactical. Tactical is a great way to learn every mechanic in the game because they can pretty much do it all, right? So give all these things a try. Keep slamming your head against it. It's definitely a skill of reps, and it's a depreciating skill. I noticed I took like a weekend off because I went to go see Metallica in Seattle when I got early access to the game, and I came back and I was like, oh crap, my parry is just shit right now. It's like that with most video game skills like this that are timing related, right? So just kind of get your pacing in and you'll get it down. I promise you'll have so much fun. And if you have any tips to parrying, go ahead and let me know in the comment section below. Always want people to get as much information as they can out to the people. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.